similarities in many ways. I just ran into Anita Hartman walking in this morning, and I was going through my mind some of the similarities, and obviously shared governance comes to mind, and the three-legged stool of faculty and physicians, board of regents, a board of the hospital, students, patients, great similarities. The big difference, though, is the revenue levers that you can pull in a hospital with quick program development and charge structures and contracts, and you just don't have that luxury here in a public institution. Peter Drucker, the great management engineer, once said, "The most complex organization is today's hospital. It is not. It is a public educational institution, a multi-campus program." What I have learned this last 6 months really has been fascinating, but lots and lots of moving parts. And we'll touch on some of that today. I believe culturally in the past, Brian Rogers, who I think is a towering figure in the history of the university, probably had a fairly casual style. He had been here 45 years, knew the ins and outs, legislatively, etc. My approach is with a team, and what I saw at the hospital and through time is the incredible resources, because I didn't have all that knowledge, and that you can bring to bear on an issue. And what I would like to do is just point out a few of the team members who are here today. Susan Heinrichs, the provost, been around for many, many years and is the oracle on the cabinet, has all the facts and figures and great detailed knowledge. Kari Burrell, Vice Chancellor for Admin Services and Executive Officers, only been here just over a year or so, took Pat Pitney's spot. Mike Spraga, Vice Chancellor for University and Student Advancement, great deal of focus on the Arctic, and one of the very, very exciting areas of development for the university. Larry Hinsman is not here, Vice Chancellor for Research, recently named. Is Nettie LaBelle-Hammer here? Let me reach out to Nettie if I don't see Nettie right now. But anyway, Nettie is an able spokesperson. Yvonne Peter, Vice Chancellor for Rural and Native Education, again, fairly new to the university. And I just want to mention, and we'll get into some of the specifics of the budget development and all the changes and the demands from Juneau relative to the budget and the work that Raj Kirparty has played, just pulling numbers together over the last few days. Anyway, this afternoon, as we go through this agenda, I'll give an update. I really would like to take questions on the fly as they come up. I'll stop occasionally. Please, if anything comes to mind, go ahead, and we'll just continue to have an exchange here. A time of great transitions, unprecedented change, $3.6 billion budget gap that we're dealing with at the state level, and then of course that transfers to every agency across the state. Strategic directions you've heard about, statewide transformation, campus safety. This has really been an incredible period if you stop and step back and reflect on what's happening at the university. And the willingness to shoulder these new transitions, new president, new chancellor, new vice chancellors, etc. But what I'd like to do today is focus on the budget, focus somewhat on strategic pathways, but I think you'll quickly see strategic pathways is not really the issue here and now. It's this budget, FY17, and we'll talk about that, and then we will spend a good amount of time on strategic pathways, so you begin to get familiar with what that concept is, as much as we know, and the time that it will take and suggestions on forward to learn more about it. With that, I will mention a couple of other key leadership changes, and actually I'll just start right at the top with the chancellor search. And Kari, could I ask you maybe just to step up? We're only using one microphone because of the KUAC production. But maybe a quick update on research.
So we launched a search last fall for a new chancellor. We have a large search committee that has representatives from faculty, staff, students, and administrators, and some community members on it. It's a 16-member committee. We also hired a outside search consultant who has done these types of recruitments for other universities and is guiding us through the process. So we posted the position closed in January, and we had 41 applicants to be for folks who are interested in being the new chancellor. The search committee went through those applications last week. We've selected 10 candidates for interviews. They're going to do interviews this weekend, and then the idea is that out of those interviews, hopefully identify 3 or 4 or maybe 5 really strong candidates to bring onto campus for finalist interviews, and then we will run them through an open campus vetting process, which means that there will be open forums where people can come meet them, hear what they have to say, ask questions. We'll run them through meetings with the governance committees as well. So faculty, senate will have time with them, staff council will have time with them, student government will have time with them. So we're on track, I hope, for making an announcement. The president will be making the final selection, but he's aiming to make an announcement in either April or May about who the new chancellor is, and hopefully get that person on board this summer. So that's where we are. Any questions about the search? It's going to be obviously an important position for the university, challenging times, so we really are looking for the right person to step in and take us through the next crazy few years that we're going to be going through. Thanks.
Okay, and from time to time, I'll stop and just encourage you to ask questions for a dialogue. A couple of other key changes, as I mentioned. Larry Hinsman, the Vice Chancellor for Research. Brad Moran, new Dean of School of Fish and Ocean Sciences. Hayo Eichen, named Director of the International Arctic Research Center. It's been fascinating, especially with Larry and Hayo, to hear the international acclaim both of these gentlemen have received, just with emails and correspondence that I've received once the word got out. And Laura McCullough, Dean of Students, has been named. In the meantime, we're still working through some transitional roles. Susan Hahn is still serving as interim dean of the library. Steve Atwater, interim dean with the School of Education. Bill Schnabel, interim director of I&E, and Brian Eward, interim director of Interior Alaska Campus. So we're in the process of filling that. Hopefully in time shortly we'll have some names there as well. Relative to the FY17 budget, this is the real focus and concern that the administrative team's working on. We're addressing a $26 million gap, which continues to be our main focus. Just received some additional information today from Chris Christensen, the university lobbyist, in a meeting with the president and the other chancellors and short administrative teams in Anchorage and Juneau. And this issue is moving very, very quickly. You're reading about it in the paper. There are some great and significant changes which Representative Wilson has proposed. And what I would like to do right now is mention that there will be a call for action from the university to get the word out on what this university provides for the community in terms of research, in terms of academic preparation, in terms of workforce. We'll get to that in a little bit, though. But it's now time for Representative Wilson and others, both on the House and Senate subcommittees, full finance committees, to hear from the university and from individuals who love the university as much as this team does. From my notes this morning, this was just as of a couple of hours ago, the House subcommittee is entertaining a $62 million cut from the approved budget, strictly focusing on student instruction. At the moment, research, the full complement, the full robust charge of the university's mission of research, instruction, and community service is not being heard. There's a real educational message that must be communicated effectively to the House and Senate committees. The House hopes to close their deliberations. This is a subcommittee. It then goes on to the full Finance Committee of the House tomorrow at 7 p.m. The Senate subcommittee, which is chaired by Senator Pete Kelly, will pick up their deliberations starting Wednesday. They hope to close by Monday. They'll be working over the weekend and looking to then provide about 2 or 3 weeks for longer term deliberations relative to the numbers that have been proposed. This is moving so quickly that what I'm going to suggest is we will get to you later today through an email or through the communications of the Chancellor's reports. The members of the House subcommittee, members of the Senate subcommittee, a few talking points which you should focus on, and then would ask that you get an email out to all members in the next 2 or 3 days. For the House, and obviously the better the Senate works through the weekend. When communicating on a legislative priority, respectful, short, sweet, less is more, but a personal address is more meaningful. This will be tracked right back to your legislative districts, and legislators tend to look at those communications coming from their own districts. They'll compile and aggregate others. It makes a difference, and maybe I can just take a segue there and talk a little bit about that testimony at the Board of Regents. But for the most part, it is those constituents in their respective voting districts that make the most difference. But a true show of force would be good. Your own words are very important. With that said, I've served on the Board of Regents 4 years, and I've been here 6 months. I've never seen such compelling testimony as I have seen at the last Board of Regents meetings. It was 40 people showed up to testify. It was compelling. It was well done. It was to the point. The School of Fisheries, in fact, came with the crew, one spokesperson, and that show of solidarity was very, very meaningful. At the end of the testimony, Stacy Lucasen, student regent from UAF, said, if this is what this town turns out for this university, what is happening and how important is the university focus in the rural settings? And I thought it was very insightful. It was then picked up by a number of other regions for those who listened in. But anyway, testimony can be very compelling and very powerful, and don't overlook what a call to action can be here. And again, I'll spend a little bit of time on that as the program unfolds here. You can stop. Any questions? Yes, Tiff.
So in the FY17 budget, here's the February research that perhaps programs next year. This research but at the classroom field, I don't think here.
So actually that was probably more of a comment than a question, but I'll just repeat it for folks. So it's Dr. Benowitz, is that right? So his observation is that researchers, although I think in Representative Wilson's line, she's kind of dividing the university into those who teach and those who do other things like research and outreach, and it really is very much an integrated function at the university, that researchers are also teachers in some ways. And so I think that is the kind of thing that would be very helpful in providing feedback to the legislature. They don't understand the research function of the university. They don't understand our outreach roles and what we do there. And they're focusing on the parts that they understand, which is teaching. And so that's what they've, so far in their proposed budget, they've proposed funding the teaching portion of the university and not funding the other portion. So if we could spend some time in the next couple of weeks educating them about what do we do when we say research, how does that impact students, communities, the state as a whole, and the same thing on the outreach side. They just need to understand that a little bit better. And I want to say, I don't want to make it sound like we're putting this all out on our employees to do this and our students to do this. The system office has been working very, very hard with the committee on this over the last couple of weeks. It's getting a little frustrated. It's calling in reinforcements is basically what we're doing at this point.
Other questions? I'll hit a couple of, yes.
I've heard a lot about research. Talking about the legislature's been talking about research and how they're want to cut that. May I implore the university to also include creative activities in the research component?
And it's advocacy for all creative activities. Did you hear, by the way, Jack Wilbur at the Board of Regents and the applause he received? Tony Johansson. I have heard both from Susan and Kari just on the economic machinery of the undergraduate liberal arts impact of how important that is. So it comes both creating and building and making great citizens. It's also a very important economic engine of the university. We're hammering away on it, but your point is well taken and not lost. We're also taking notes here. So as these ideas come up, as questions come up, we'll capture them and make sure we're advocating accurately as we with legislators. Back to the budget. Another issue I want to point out, and I'm going to bring up some names. Some people will recognize these names, but I think it kind of puts a sense of community on this, and that was one of the attributes that was so endorsed this past Thursday and Friday. Jim Dodson, chairman of the Fairbanks Economic Development effort, testified, and he brought up Scott Goldsmith's name, and he said, when you're testifying, when you're advocating, keep in mind there's three ways you're gonna balance this budget. Balance the budget, not favorably press beyond a balanced budget. One is cuts, and that's what we're hearing over and over and over again. He said the other is the PFD and income taxes. And let's face it, you've got to step up and advocate some of those other sides of the equation. And when testifying, when communicating, when advocating, it can't all be I'll take. There's a give and a take here. For students, it's tuition. We have one of the lowest tuitions in the nation. We're going to have to look at that again. For faculty and staff, it is, and students, it's that income statement for all of us. It's the PFD. Don't be afraid of putting some of those sacred cows in those letters to show that balance and that thoughtfulness. This slide, and I may ask a couple of my colleagues to step forward. When we talk about the budget, there are many, many pieces. Starting with I'll just touch on a few comments, and then all this comes back to a process, and I'll show you the timeline of activity. But upper left-hand corner, the Vice Chancellor's budget targets. Ultimately, the Vice Chancellors are going to have to roll up the different recommendations made. They will be vetted. There will be a shared governance process, but they're going to have to make those recommendations, and ultimately, I would sign off on those or challenge, and we will develop a budget. But the Vice Chancellors play a very critical role in the logistics of rolling up these budgets, vetting them, of challenging them, of going back and bringing forth additional information. Program review process, and Susan, I don't know if you want to comment on this, but 27 programs under review now. We will be going into special program reviews. This is essentially at the heart of getting to the core of what that balanced budget looks like.
The 27 programs currently under review are just those that are part of our regular 5-year cycle. So every program is reviewed once every 5 years. However, 2 years ago, the Planning and Budget Committee established some criteria for having special reviews for programs that have low enrollment, have low graduation rates, or have dramatically falling enrollment in recent years. And there will be several programs that will be looked at. The exact number is not determined, but right now we have a list of 6. We'll have a special program review this spring semester, which could result in their elimination if indicates that they don't have substantial potential to improve given seriously constrained budget climate. There is also the possibility of additional program reviews. Those would occur later. We don't have yet the exact timeframes for the strategic pathways process, but as we look at a greater focus for each of the 3 universities, the way that the 3 universities would focus would be by eliminating potentially some programs at some universities. But that would be later. The timeframes that are being talked about right now would not have those special program reviews occurring until next year at the earliest.
Let me touch on a couple of other of the confounding puzzle pieces that we're juggling and struggling with. Upper right-hand corner, strategic pathways. And you just heard about this, and there was quite a response again at the Regents meetings about this. This really was only introduced a month ago. It is not the critical variable at play. The budget is right now. But it is important. It's on people's minds. It represents a transformational restructuring, which we have to keep our eyes on. There will be opportunities to engage in the analysis and understanding the implications, the ramifications, but I'll show you in a moment where we're down the road several years on something like this. Pay attention now, but it's this budget that we're really focused on at the moment. Middle left, the legislative discussions, you're reading in the paper, it's that House Finance Subcommittee that we're most concerned about, educating them relative to research and the humanities and what this university provides. The call to action, you're going to hear about more in a moment. The Planning and Budget Committee is an interdisciplinary team under normal circumstances would go through a regular calendar of review and those reductions, those changes would be vetted by that interdisciplinary committee. Transformation team seems to get lost in all of this, and I'm coming into this late a little bit. This is the lean effort. Truly, in some there's carry over to strategic pathways, truly looking at doing things more efficiently. This was the call to action in hospitals for the last 10 years. You're seeing major restructuring, banking, all sorts of things. Well, it's now hit the university, and through that come various quality improvement efforts over time, hopefully. Well, we're dealing with this incredible budget issue, and so things have sped up. I don't want to underestimate the importance of that. And then lower right-hand corner, the Board of Regents. Ultimately, the decision-making authority of the university, and it is important to educate the Board of Regents as well. Again, as I look at my 4 years, not until you're inside the walls of the university do you really appreciate incredible people, the programs underway, the efforts, the commitment, the incredible hours this past fall that I've been witnessing from this particular team and others out there. But we must continue to provide meaningful presentations and communications with the Board of Regents to get them up to speed, especially in these times. Relative to Dr. Benowitz's earlier question, where are the revenues coming from? This is simply a slide which depicts roughly where the big dollars are coming, 30,000 foot level. I do not have research broken out here. It's embedded within these 4 or 5 key slices. The important thing I'd like to point out is the blue slice, 42% state general funds. We are one of, even though we're under a crisis now with such a major change with the price of oil drop, the state of Alaska is one of the most generous states in the union relative to its university. I cannot think of another state that whose legislature funds at that level. And I'm just checking to confirm it's just right at the top of the list. Likewise, tuition and fees is only 10%. We are one of the best bargains across the country. And again, we enjoy a very favorable position. Keep this in mind when you contact those legislators, because we are at an incredible level of giving. It's not going to stay that way if the price of oil continues where it is, but be realistic about what's going on. We do have a responsibility to the state of Alaska to look for opportunities where there are some. Here's the daunting chart of the budget gap. The far left small FY14 bar represents an $8.5 million gap which the university dealt with 3 years ago. FY15 is the $14 million gap. Last year, a $20 million gap, a total of $42 million over those 3 years. So here we are with FY17, and we are grappling, second to the right, a $26 million budget gap based on what the governor proposed. And the crisis we're dealing with right now is what's coming out of the House subcommittee, Representative Wilson's committee, and she has proposed a $51 million cut, and again, does not reflect strictly the teaching element or her calculations on what she believes the teaching element is. Does not include research or service. This is the communication gap that we have to bridge, and it's going to take an effort of an entire town. So we are in, as you know, we've typically, again, when I'm thinking of the hospital, we were always using about $100 a barrel figure for our projection of Medicaid receipts, and likewise, the university is looking roughly in that ballpark, and now we're dealing with the $25, $30 a barrel, and the outlook for the near term certainly doesn't appear to be reversing at all. So this is the gap, but it graphically suggests how traumatic this is, and keep that in mind. As I know, 30,000 foot view, but that's what we have to communicate. Let me stop for a moment. Any thoughts on how to help communicate that, or the reality of? Yes, Jeff.
I'm pretty sure the amount Alaska residents pay in federal taxes on the PDF equals the university budget. So when every one of us gets a PDF, we send $600 to Washington, where we put that money towards the university. It would be more than just the value of the PDF being into the government, but we wouldn't be sending that money outside. Has anyone looked at those numbers? That federal burden on our PDF money, we're just giving it away.
Raj, any comments? Okay. 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 These are ideas and thoughts. Just raise your hand. Let's grab it. We're going to need a full court press on this. So I appreciate the comes. I'll tick through this, quickly. If you had a typical contingency budgeting process, would begin in January 2015. Would work through the process. Would implement specific reductions, and then the provost would be engaged in about November. The Planning and Budget Committee, January to April. The recommendations go to the leadership team. We finalize those in May and June, and then we have a budget for FY17. Now, because of the speed at which things are moving as we sit here, this obviously is going to change, but that's what we would normally see. Here's what I wanted to communicate just on a broad slide. So this process really begins upper left-hand corner, blue bar, the Vice Chancellor's first look at a budget in November and December. In fact, even before that, Planning and Budget Committee gets it through the winter months. The Vice Chancellors are engaged in March, another, next month typically, and then we would, in a case like this, begin to start discussing, where are layoff notices, where are consolidations made. There have been a number of people who said, this is grim news. Just tell me when the other shoe is going to drop and let us know. We don't know. And I wish I could be more definitive. We simply don't know. So there have been some notices already given. There probably will be in several weeks. And then once we get a much more definitive picture of the budget, it could be a week and a half from now, as the House and Senate finishes up. We'll have a better idea of where we're going. But that budget is not really completed until July 1. I'd like to point out one other issue on this, just to put this all in perspective. It's the budget that we've got to focus on right now and ensure that we can balance and communicate and engage as effectively as possible. I'm not going to shift. This strategic pathways, just for a moment, was introduced on January 22nd. On January 23rd, the faculty and Senate had a retreat, and that's the first time the faculty and Senate heard about it. If you look at the bottom bar, this is the best depiction. That the red corridor on the far left is when we first heard about this, and then we hear about it on the 22nd, communicated to faculty Senate on the 23rd, and President Johnson ends up in the hospital for a week or more the next week. Suddenly things really become complicated in trying to get the message out, understanding what this is all about. We have a little bit more information. We'll go into it here shortly. But relative to some of the testimony that I heard at the Regents meeting, and the response from the Regents was essentially two philosophies. Take a deep breath. We've got some time to figure this one out. And the other philosophy was, it's time to move and to reshape and realign. And so you have a bit of a mix of messages, but at least in my view, we have some time. We have to keep our eyes on the ball relative to what this means, engage to understand the analysis that's needed and the creative thinking that's needed going forward, but we do have some time. It's the budget that I am most concerned about. Next slide. So what have we done? And we've touched on some of this relative to the budget here and now. Eliminated some of the low enrollment programs. Begin streamlining processes such as the grant awards efforts, human resources, pre-recruitment, the procurement processes. Printing services have been closed. Reduced services for the shuttle in the library and the Wood Center, travel restrictions, hiring freeze, merging of positions. So this streamlining is occurring now. Special program review, will begin. You heard Susan's comment on the previous 27 programs and the merging of programs. And then as we look forward to special academic reviews, as Susan mentioned, low enrollment programs, low graduation rates, rapidly declining enrollment by any particular certificate or diploma or degree. Special program review, we'll be looking at public information and marketing activities, farm and large animal care facilities, summer sessions, lifelong learning, KUAC, and essentially what's the best way to generate revenue and have the least impact on our community and our facilities. So these areas will be reviewed. Revenue generating opportunities, obviously, to where we can find them. And not just as an aside, this is where a university differs from a hospital. A hospital has an opportunity to generate revenue. FY17 priorities. How do we navigate this crisis and yet remain strong? I've heard a number of people say, "Well, do I send my kids here? What are we going to look like?" It's an incredible university that we have. I've been here 30 years. I've been introduced to this world-class research effort. I've taken classes here. I was at the symphony. You're at the hockey games. Something's happening all the time. It's one of the reasons that we came to Fairbanks. But some of the priorities, number one priority right now, capital priority for the entire system, is this engineering building. Total cost of $121 million, secured to date $74.8 million, and remaining funding $45.8 million. I might add that Usabelli Coal Mine stepped up and donated $500K to help finish off the 4th floor. ConocoPhillips $500, and 2 weeks ago at the philanthropic gala, British Petroleum Alaska provided $1 million, and that's a big reach for everybody in the state. We're all struggling, but the commitment to these engineers need 200 a year in the state. We're producing 100. Anchorage is producing 100. This is an incredible endorsement of the efforts of this school and this campus. Put you on the spot, Mike. Do you want to say anything about philanthropy and revenue generation relative to what we're going through with cuts?
So as the Chancellor said, it's great to have Usabelli Coal Mine, $500,000, ConocoPhillips and BP. That's $2 million toward the 4th floor of the engineering building. That's only 1 floor, so it's for the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. So we need $6.5 million. $2 million we literally have in the bank. We're still privately raising $4.5 million. It leaves the rest of the building as it is. I've joked a little bit, but it's very seriously about it's supposed to be a state-of-the-art building, and right now when you look at it from the outside, it's just art. And that does not create the 300 to 350 engineers that's promised out of that building, nor does it provide the classroom space, nor does it provide the support and the labs for our faculty. So even though the philanthropic has been focused on the top floor, the rest of the building has been a legislative push by the University of Alaska Board of Regents as our #1 priority. When I was in Juneau last week, I heard loud and clear that there's limited interest in any kind of capital project. And even though the state has funded $70 million towards this facility, there's very little interest in providing that capital resource for the additional classroom space and laboratory space and faculty space that we need. So although we will stay diligent on our $4.5 million yet to be raised for the top floor for ACEP, we want to remain diligent on the engineering building. So even though we heard things that we did not want to hear last week, the Board of Regents, the Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce, each of the campuses, the president, our legislative support staff down in Juneau are pushing on our legislative #1 ask on this side, the construction side, which would be the engineering building. We have also articulated that this is about instruction. It is about graduating students, but it's also about the research endeavor, and that is that this is how you create intellectual capacity. This is how you spin off companies. This is the job of the university. So you can have an engineering building, but it must be state of the art for our faculty, our staff, and our students. And of course, it plays into economic development because we know engineers are retiring now at a pace that is greater than we can fill. We hope that in the future there are other projects in the state that need our engineers. So even though philanthropically just the top floor, I'd like to be able to help Emily Dragus and her group continue to raise the rest of the $4.5 million we need, and then move our philanthropic targets elsewhere to the campus.
Again, any questions? It's good to see the Anchorage community get behind this effort in that 1-2 punch of Anchorage and Fairbanks, whole state, the #1 priority, and we're hearing that strongly.
Chancellor,
Yes.
we have a couple of questions that came in from the audience earlier. Two are focused on strategic pathways, but you had mentioned something about programs before, so I wanted to go ahead and ask this one. What will become of the foreign languages department? The student asked, I'm a Japanese major, a culinary major, freshman, and I'm wondering what's in store.
Okay. I'll ask Susan to comment on this.
Well, first, our accreditation requires us to do what's called teach out for any students who are already enrolled in academic programs here at the university. So if the student is an officially declared major in Japanese studies or culinary arts, it's our obligation as an accredited institution to enable him or her to complete their program in a reasonable time. So if there are any program eliminations, faculty would still be retained for several years in order to allow the students to complete. Relative to foreign languages specifically, there hasn't been a lot of discussion under strategic pathways about whether there would be one institution that would be primarily responsible for those. It seems that the Board of Regents and the President support the idea that certain basic courses in humanities, in the areas of the arts, and so on that are part of the fabric of universities everywhere should be taught at all three of our institutions. It's just not clear to the extent, the depth and breadth of the offerings that would be expected in the future. Something that we'll need to pay attention to. Certainly the Board of Regents and the President, I think, will be looking for broad feedback on what each university should continue to offer as these changes and restructurings go on.
Susan, while I've got you up there, can I go ahead and throw this other one in? This is kind of a long question, but a broad question. I'll try to get it right. Given that the intense socio-ecological challenges facing the Arctic region and all of Alaska require holistic, interdisciplinary thinking, it should seem apparent that the students need a similarly broad education. Yet the Strategic Pathways proposal does not seem to recognize this and would instead break down the availability of interdisciplinary education. How will the university prevent this move that will only make the system less attractive for students to worsen our community's brain drain problem and instead strengthen our investment in strong education in our state's human capital and problem-solving abilities?
Well, the first thing to remember, and the President and the Board of Regents have both emphasized this at the Board of Regents meeting, is that the draft of strategic pathways that's available for people to look at on the web now is simply a concept or a draft. It's not a final decision. It is essentially a springboard for discussion, starting point. Now, that draft did suggest that interdisciplinary studies would be a focus of University of Alaska Southeast. But I think that was to reflect the fact that the University of Alaska Southeast has an interdisciplinary undergraduate minor, Bachelor of Liberal Studies, I think it's called, that has attracted a fairly substantial number of students, and so it got listed there for that reason. University of Alaska Fairbanks has long talked about and also executed interdisciplinary research and education in many different ways. It's a very important part of what we are, something better than most research universities, in part because of our small size, which keeps people in closer touch with one another. And I certainly don't envision that changing as we go forward. I think interdisciplinary research is key to understanding the challenges of climate and social change in areas. I can't imagine us pursuing our specialty in northern research without having that interdisciplinary perspective. And as the person who asked the question pointed out, it's equally important to prepare our students to do that kind of interdisciplinary work. People who do excellent interdisciplinary research don't just spring from the earth fully formed. They need to be educated to think in those ways. So certainly from my perspective, this is something that's important for the University of Alaska to maintain.
Thank you, Susan. I wanted to mention too, we have about 200 people online watching via Google Hangouts on air, and I wanted to get those student questions in while we're still on the common break. Thanks.
I'll pull this out just for a moment. Susan, let me bring you back in. We've just moved into the strategic pathway section of this address, and I thought we could bring this up and talk a little bit about this document. Now, again, this is the document that was first presented. Hung up here. First presented on January 21st. That Friday, 21st or 22nd, and then again the 23rd. It has gone through some changes since that first very rough draft. The title was simply Strategic Pathways. The first change was 2016-2025. Draft was placed all over it. And then there was a little bit further clarification on mission, objective, core principles, etc. These lanes of activity is what has generated the most controversy. For Anchorage, this has been called a metropolitan university. What is the definition of a metropolitan university? What is the focus? Still to be decided. Very much a work in progress. University of Alaska Fairbanks Research University. I think we have a pretty good handle on that, and clearly the Arctic was identified and recognized, and the PhD granting effort was focused here. But the undergraduate enrollments in education and in business and in engineering are critical to this success, and the humanities, to as I say, the economic engine of student enrollment. This has yet to be decided, and there will be opportunities. I want to come back to this, and we learned a little bit more about it just this morning. University of Alaska Southeast, liberal arts and science, interdisciplinary environmental, as Susan had recognized. The area that has gained the greatest discussion is this marine biology and fisheries. There is no question that graduate research is at the UAF campus, and we saw clearly a robust showing from the undergraduate voice at the Regents meeting. What we're hearing across the state from a number of educators, a number of strong voices is, you've got the water, you've got the university. Shouldn't the University of Alaska Southeast have some type of marine biology undergraduate focus? And that is controversial right now. The discussion is maybe a shared program of some sort. But clearly, what was reflected on Thursday and Friday was impressive, and I think it was very informative for a number of the stakeholders. A couple of other important issues. You hear the discussion, well, maybe there's different models. Healthcare, Anchorage largely has that. I can tell you, coming from my background, I remember what happened to this day. Mike Kelly was on the hospital board. We had a 17% vacancy rate. He said, we just hired a president. Let's get him down here, ask him how he can help us address this issue. And Mark Hamilton said, we will build a nursing program, but we have to give it up. It has to go down to Anchorage. We cannot have two programs here. Things moved. Next thing you know, Alaska has urban, not rural. Rural's another story. Urban has a vacancy rate of roughly 3% in nursing. It was an incredible effort to meet the demands of workforce initiative in the state. One focus largely out of Anchorage. Then you look at engineering. 2 programs, both highly successful, highly respected, highly needed for the demand, both in Anchorage and in Fairbanks. And then you have a School of Management or Education, and each of the 3 universities are providing those services. So it's a mix and match. It's not quite understood why is it 1 campus for one particular discipline and 2 campuses for another and 3 campuses for a third. Still to be decided. And I hope to point that out maybe with this next slide, if I have it right. Here's the timeline. Again, we talked about 16, 17, 18, the normal budgeting cycle that occurs. Here's pathways. We're way down the road. Can't lose sight of this. It's important to understand what the ramifications long-term are. There will be opportunities to engage, but the issue at hand is the FY17 budget from my perspective. But I want to put this in context, and you heard that at the Regents meeting, John Davies is the one who said, let's take a deep breath and let's think about what this requires. There's a document on the website now that talks a little bit about the process. Debbie, I don't think we were able to build that one in. Yes, I'm sorry, next slide. This talks a little bit about the phases of the development of the strategic pathway. And we have Regents' responsibilities up here. We have administrative responsibilities here. So there's about 8 columns. January to March, admin proposes a framework. This is in January. And that draft plan was adopted by the Regents. And the language of that was the Board of Regents authorizes President Johnson to implement the direction reflected in the University of Alaska Strategic Framework. And that's what it says. Implement the direction. Wide open. Lots of opportunity. April to June. So we've just moved into this, or we will move into this period shortly. Admin finalizes the process of figuring out strategic pathways. And now as I move into July, October, January, phase 1 starts in July, FY17, and comes up through September of 18. So that's a whole year related to the process, understanding what's involved. Now, we will be communicating, providing opportunities to get engaged, to understand what this could be, how we're going to analyze this, but it is very much an unknown. But anyway, I want to reiterate and hopefully calm the fears of what this might look like, because there will be time. It's that House Finance Subcommittee that I'm worried about. Moving, any questions? Don't want to go too fast on that. Yeah, yes, Dr. Willie.
Well, thanks, Mike, and the others for this forum. It's always important to get information, and I think I have two points to make. I think there's a lack of information. We're talking about programs. We're not mentioning the programs. Our deans directors are asking us, give us suggestions where to cut, but they don't give us their budget so we can make an informed decision. So the one thing that I think, you know, we don't really know what the Budget and Planning Committee is doing. Do they post agendas? Do they post minutes? I don't think so. So this lack of transparency, I think, is causing a lot of the fear among the employees and the students here at the university. So I would suggest that each major administrative unit will publish their budget in the next couple of weeks so that everyone can have an informed, can look at that and make an informed suggestion to you and other leaders. The other thing I think that is probably even more pressing right now is that we heard from your team, from the Board of Regents, from President Johnson, very much a focus on consolidating academic programs. But you can call it administrative streamlining, effectiveness processing, or whatever you want to call it. What I want to see is a strategic pathways type document for UAF and for the entire university that exactly does the same about restructuring the administrative functions of this university so that we can actually see what you're doing there, not some amorphous type of statement. We're looking at efficiency, but address whether this vice chancellor is necessary, whether this associate dean is necessary, even whether a dean or director is necessary. Because the bread and butter is the academic mission of the university. It is the tuition that the students and the fees that the students bring in. It's the faculty and the academic staff that work to make sure that the teaching and education is at the top level. They also ensure about $100 million of research funding coming to this university. The academic side of the house is really not the problem, right?
So I'm going to respectfully suggest, just as you advocate for this university, and we call for restating the cuts, fully funding, and we're willing to look at PFDs and taxes, cuts both ways. That's what my suggestion is here too. We've got to look across this university in all areas. I respectfully accept any suggestion on how can we administratively streamline and trim down. Great, absolutely. I don't want to be defensive, but I do know that a number of people are carrying 2 job titles and are working morning, noon, and night, and I'm just thinking, way to go. Can we do more? Sure we can. And we'll find those ways. But I want to keep open the civil, creative, thorough, comprehensive review that is probably going to touch all of us. Appreciate the comments. Other comments? Yep.
On another topic, a student gave me this question earlier. Do you think the Finish in 4 program to get more students to graduate is effective? Why or why not?
So I may ask Mike to, or Susan.
The program was recast a little bit. It's called Track 15 now, and the idea is simply to have people complete their program in the usual time. If it's a 2-year program, that would be 2 years, and if it's a 4-year program, that would be 4 years. But with some recognition that some people do better or have other obligations. For example, they work, they may have family obligations, and 4 years isn't right for them. As far as the impact of the program, we have seen a gradual increase in the number of credits per semester that students are taking since the program was launched. I think that has amounted to about 1 credit increase on average per student, which is an impact. I think some students are finishing a semester or 2 earlier than they might have otherwise. Properly conceived, this is a benefit to students. It gets them to think about their living expenses and other expenses as they attend college, to reason through the fact that if they take more credits per semester, they may be able to spend less total on their college education. But again, as we talk to students about this, we have to look at their individual circumstances and realize whether or not the fast track is the best route for them.
Susan provided the facts that we have seen an uptick, but we also recognize that our student population is very different here. Some students come for a semester and they stop out, and it takes them 6, 7, 8, 9 years to graduate. That's not our traditional freshman. So we know that even though we have reinforced the fact that if you take 15 credits per semester, you'll be on track for 4 years. and there's a cost savings there. You get out in the job market quicker. We know that we have different students here. We have traditional 18-year-olds, but we also have 45 and 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds that come to school here. And so we see upticks where we think we would see them, maybe in those traditional students. But I think the narrative around taking more credits and what the benefit of that is we have seen the benefit. And even just the discussions, I will tell you, talking with parents about financial aid, they're very interested in their sons and daughters getting out in 4 years and trying to help with that plan going forward. So even though we've seen a mild uptick, I think just the discussion around having that kind of campaign has helped, at least with the awareness side.
Okay, I'll look for hands, otherwise I'll touch, yes, Jim.
In their budget,
Okay.
the thing. So,
How much state funds are needed for matching fund grants, where a lot of us researchers, our matching fund isn't a direct matching fund. Me and my wife have over $3 million in active NSF funding. Remember that when we have to hire 500 people? And $1 million of that goes back into the system. There's no matching funds required for any NSF grant that I know of, but, which doesn't mean there isn't, but we need infrastructure. And so we need laboratories and instruments, and the state appropriations are helping support that and enabling us to get grants. And NSF's not going to give money to an unstable university where people are let go, where instruments aren't upkept. So that matching fund is a complicated thing to communicate, and I think we can do better at that.
Appreciate it. Again, I'm going to suggest as we hopefully leverage a call to action, there are some here who really have some insights that others don't, and I suspect that's been part of your discussions. I know you've been in touch with Representative Wilson and others, but use your expertise too to help us make that case. Anyway, we've captured that.
Another quick question on strategic pathways. Many undergraduate students choose UAF because of the broad range of programs and majors available here. Often these students are just out of high school and it takes them a few years of study to focus in on a major. How would strategic pathways continue allowing students the latitude and flexibility to explore various disciplines while choosing their major?
Great question. Yeah. All I can say is, as you saw in the graph, we are on the early stages, and I think, in fact, had a discussion with President Johnson just earlier today about this very thing. That undergraduate experience is critical to the success of this university. We don't know yet, but helping to define some of those roles and responsibilities is going to be key as we go forward.
Just a comment, it helps sometimes just to ask the questions, and that's why we're here.
Okay. Yes, we have another question.
So going back to the program reviews discussion, and the last round when they were doing that, it seemed like a number of the programs reviewed were not necessarily things that would save the university money. So as an example, one of the programs that was reviewed was the BA in chemistry, and we already have a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry program. So cutting the BA program doesn't seem like it would save funds. So could you comment on that?
It's true that there were a number of programs like that. They cost a little bit in terms of administrative overhead. They need to be assessed. They need to undergo that program review on a regular 5-year cycle. The assessment and review are accreditation requirements, but admittedly those costs are very small. The main reason that we eliminated those programs is that they weren't serving students well. We'd occasionally have a major or two in the BA in chemistry or the BS in sociology, to name another one in that category, but they almost never graduated. And so we just thought it best that they choose something else so that they would get into a program that was more likely to graduate.
Okay, pressing on, talk just a quick update on campus safety. As you know, and maybe next slide, Debbie. As you know, this was the whole Title IX issue was a national concern. 160 universities are under the Office of Civil Rights review at the moment. We identified shortcomings in our practice relative to suspensions and expulsions. Those have been corrected. Since that time, we've initiated a number of efforts to create a safer campus. What comes to mind immediately is the Green Dot program. 350 students, staff, faculty have been educated on that. It's, in short, see something, say something, do something, find a way to intervene in a potentially bad situation. We had a national trainer up last week. Other campuses from across the state were involved. That seems to be catching on. The military was here 2 weeks ago, and we're beginning our planning with the military. I know the hospital's interested. I know that some of the women's advocacy groups in town are interested, and I think we're on the cusp of some changing dynamics. Only time will tell, but clearly the attention has been brought to this issue. Keith Mallard, Mae Marsh, Kim Stickler, is it? Kim Swisher, I'm sorry, Kim, have been instrumental. Ronnie Houchin, a whole group in the steering group. But anyway, I can see some and feel it changing on this campus, which is exciting. Guns on campus. Yes.
Can I interrupt? Sorry. Yeah. There was a question about how strategic pathways might affect gender equity in education under Title IX.
Great question. Hadn't hit the radar yet. But again, I'm going to say we'll grab it and we'll raise that issue. Any thoughts? Good. Okay, guns on campus. Senate Bill 174. Last week, Senator Kelly introduced the Senate bill. This again is an issue which is playing out across the U.S., across U.S. campuses. Split the room in half. We may be 58 and 50. It's a very controversial issue for the nation. We're working to seek some amendments that would allow us to manage high-risk situations. It has a lot of momentum right now. Frankly, I can't believe it, but here's where we are. So we're trying to work with some amendment changes that would at least allow us to manage a situation better than we can now. Yes, Jeff.
Currently guns are banned, so we'll assume they are. Tobacco is banned for safety reasons. Marijuana is banned for safety reasons. Yet we sell alcohol. Most Title IX violations or assaults involve alcohol. Has there been any discussion about increasing safety by banning alcohol? I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but I'm surprised we're not discussing it and that we're selling it.
Right. A couple comments, and then I may ask Keith to talk about any security, or maybe Mike. One, all things in moderation, nothing in excess, a rule of life, right? There is something to be said about responsible drinking. There's something to be said about all the conditions on a college campus that makes that a fool's errand. However, it is a part of our society. There have been different initiatives. If we could safely control that in a meaningful, respectful way, that would be my, right from the hip wish. I do know, I overheard a discussion about this issue of security in the pub, and it was just, just in the community, and I just overheard a conversation about how well that is controlled there. I don't know that for a fact. I hate to admit, I think I've been in the pub once in my life, but I think they do one heck of a job, is my sense. Mike or Keith, you want to comment on this? I'd throw you right on the spot relative to the role of alcohol on campus.
I'd be happy to comment, then turn the microphone over to Chief Mallard. Jeff, we have talked about it over the years, and one of the original ideas about having the pub was that we would be able to control access to alcohol, yet provide alcohol. That has been something that has worked quite well for us. The pub has been known to be managed very well. So we don't see a lot of problems inside the pub. We certainly haven't seen them outside of the pub. Our alcohol problems actually have happened in the residence halls and around the rest of the campuses, which is where I think your concerns are, as they are mine. So lots of education goes on in the residence halls about that. We have something called Haven training. Every student going through orientation required to take this kind of training, alcohol awareness, and then again, everything in moderation. But there's lots of education and outreach that goes on within the residence halls. A lot of our instances that happen, whether it's a conflict by roommates or there's some violent issue, most times it involves alcohol. We're just upfront about that at every college campus. So we have looked at it, not to the degree with which to ban it, but if you're 21 years or older, we allow it, certainly allow it in the pub. We think our job is to educate over and over again, but we certainly have looked at it and will continue to look at it. But in terms of the pub, they run what I think is a really good service, but also they've really watched themselves there and they do conduct themselves very well. And maybe if you want to talk later about it, I'd be very happy to. Chief Mallard, do you want to talk about instances or anything, whether it be at the residence halls on campus or the Wood Center pub?
Well, honestly, I don't think I can add anything to the statements that you already made. I think the discussion, my personal opinion is I think the discussion is worth having as we're discussing these other issues. And so I think it's a valid point to bring up. Here's one other point that came up again in the Regents meeting, which may relate to this, is what are you doing to prevent the campus safety issues? One of the areas that is exciting is this Maxian software, and what I understand is the ability to identify areas of risk and concern as you review a database, or the conditions that might be ripe for bad acts. Would that lend itself to an alcohol application of any way? It could. But anyway, the point I want to make is we are doing something on the preventative side, which is so important. Green Dot and Maxian are two issues. To the degree it could also touch the abuse of alcohol, all the better. Yes?
We had a question.
So it's actually more of a comment. If you don't know, my name is Donald Crocker. I run the pub. So I'd like to comment on our safety issues. I feel as though my staff, I work very hard along with Jerry Maxwell and the rest of the Wood Center to make our staff the most well-trained staff in Fairbanks in terms of alcohol. My staff is TAM certified. We also are going through Green Dot training, and we've gone through the Haven alcohol and minors training as well as all the other UAF required trainings. I have a very strict ban policy. Furthermore, we work very well, I feel, with Chief Mallard, and we have to call them once a semester at best. And we work very hard to try to keep an eye on all of our patrons and make sure that they get home safely and that they are drinking responsibly when they come through our doors, so that they can come back and have a good time. Seeing live music or the other things that we do to try to help enhance the arts and community in the Fairbanks as a whole.
Appreciate the comment. And again, I want to mention the question was alcohol in general. It certainly wasn't the pub.
But we used to sell cigarettes here and we stopped because of the message it was sending. And that was long before we banned cigarettes. It was a big controversy because it was supplying a huge amount of income for the Wood Center, but we decided it was sending the wrong message.
Good one. Okay, so moving on, I'll be glad to answer any question you have on the budget. Moving on to the next section, which would be the science week. Okay. Okay, so coming up, March 12th and 20, we're hosting nearly 1,000 scientists, policymakers from across the globe. Spending in the community is going to be close to $850,000. By the way, here's another tremendous impact of the university on the community. Mike, I'm going to ask you just to touch on the ministerial meeting too. There's a couple of incredible meetings coming up which suggest the international influence of this university, and it comes up time and time again. But relative to this Arctic Science Week, we're looking for volunteers. The call's been made, and as over the holiday break, if you do have time, Larry Hinsman in particular would like to hear from you.
So as Mike said, in 2017, Fairbanks and UAF will host the Arctic Ministerial. That's the chairmanship of the Arctic Council. So right now, the United States holds the chairmanship of the Arctic Council. Arctic Council are representatives of the 8 Arctic nations. In 2017, Finland takes over the chairmanship. There's a procedure and practices that goes on with transition of that chairmanship that will happen here at UAF. I think it's very much a signal that Fairbanks is a powerhouse in Arctic research policy. I would also mention the social science, culture, language recognition by the State Department that the best place they can hold this kind of transition, which will be led by this U.S. Secretary of State and his or her counterparts, will be here at UAF, and that's just on the heels of having the Arctic Science Summit Week. So much activity during the U.S. chairmanship, having President Obama in Anchorage, but understanding that a lot of experts are here in Fairbanks. But I will tell you that Admiral Papp, our U.S. representative, was very mixed between Anchorage or Fairbanks, but what really I think tipped the scales there was not just the hospitality and the research and all that, but the fact that UAF brought forward whenever we met with him all issues related to the Arctic, including issues that are socially centered. We talked about community struggles, we talked about fetal alcohol syndrome, we talked about language preservation, and we talked about ice dynamics and changing weather patterns. And those are the kind of things that the Arctic Council is trying to address. So I think that's a very big reason why they're holding their meeting here, is that we brought inclusive all the issues related to the Arctic and not just icebreakers or rocket ranges or sea ice dynamics, even though they're very important. But the notice and recognition that UAF has that breadth and depth in those academic research areas.
Couple last slides. Just a reminder of, again, this international reputation. I think we are one of 26 land, sea, and space grant universities. Incredible elite group, but that's a talking point you should be aware of. 26 in the nation. Obviously, the Sekuliak and Poker Flat and Tulip Lake and HARP program. So looking to the future, what I'd like to do is just hit a couple of things, recognizing next 2017 will be our centennial year. 3 key initiatives: fundraising, the Centennial Scholarships, the Trothieta Legacy, and Alaska Center for Energy and Power. Again, I mentioned we have some incredible philanthropic efforts with our team, and frankly, the takeaways that I would like from today is $3.6 billion state budget gap, unprecedented. FY17 budget is a priority. Pathways are important, keep an eye on them, but it's this budget that is the real focus. World-class Arctic science, strong needed undergraduate offerings. There's just so much going on this campus. It's incredible. Vibrant university. You know, I think of, I saw Chris still here? Chris left. Attended one of her English classes on James Joyce last week. It was wonderful to go to the symphony. I missed the play. I went to the hockey game. I'm telling you, things are just happening all the time. It's such a wonderful addition to the life here in this town. But there's a call to action, and it's right now. We'll recap some of these ideas in a mailing, and we're going to get out to you to touch base with the House Finance, the Senate Finance, to restore fully fund these cuts. In the same breath, think about, you know, just as Abel and I had a little give and take here, the give and take of what that legislature needs, and they need to find revenue, permanent fund, income taxes. Don't be afraid of raising that, and hopefully we can drop several hundred messages here in the next couple days to the legislature. You'll be receiving something shortly.
There was a quick question. How much of the income is from student patents and inventions? And secondly, what is the university doing to increase revenue due to goods and services the university could be providing to the community and public in general? Example, our data, etc.
So I don't have numbers on the intellectual property efforts, but I can tell you there's been some incredible inventions in this this volcanic ash forecasting. Number one has been exciting development. It is a big effort right now. Dan White headed that up, and Kathy Cahill. Rich Collins. I'm sorry. Okay. And anything else that you might add on the intellectual property commercialization? It's a wonderful revenue opportunity for universities, though, and we're headed down that path.
As Mike says, it's a wonderful opportunity. We started from a relatively low point. We had not paid much attention to capitalizing on our intellectual property until quite recently. So right now we're not generating a lot of money that way. I think it's not more than $1 million or maybe a little more than that, but not large amounts of money. So this is as yet mostly potential. To get to the second part of the question about selling goods and services in the community, there's actually a board policy against us competing with private businesses. So we need to find niches where we have the expertise and we have the special ability to deliver something. We are looking at areas like delivering non-credit instruction, various kinds of workforce or related training or training for personal development, things like that. But we have to find niches where we're not competing with private enterprise.
Susan, there was a follow-up for you from earlier that you had mentioned that programs that now have low enrollment are being reviewed, and the person asked where we can find a list of which programs those are.
Well, the enrollment data for programs normally is available on a website called the Fact Book. Now, the Fact Book actually has gone offline. It's being repaired. It should come back up. But anyone can find enrollment information for university programs there. I'll give a list of enrollment by program to the Faculty Senate, and they can post it on their website so they can see which programs have high enrollment, which programs have lower enrollment. The low enrollment programs are not slavishly eliminated solely because of numbers, although that's an important consideration. We also consider the relationship of graduate programs to research and the generation of research funding. So some graduate programs are not eliminated, their enrollments are not particularly high. And we also consider unique programs. So for instance, we have some programs in Alaska Native languages. If we were not offering those programs, there's nowhere else in the world that would be offering those programs. So we also look at that uniqueness sometimes in not programs that have.
We're closing in on 2:25. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? One thought came up earlier, more frequent, especially during the budget session here, more frequent meetings or town halls would be helpful.
Is there any effort that we could donate airline miles, and then, you know, and even if they're not meeting with folks, if they're just sitting in the hallway, sitting at the coffee shops, they're gonna run into Tammy and other people on that committee.
Advocacy efforts in general, is that
Yeah.
yes. So
Is that physical?
Yes, this week, in fact, a team is going down, and Matthew Carrick is incredible spokesperson. You probably saw his article in the paper on guns yesterday, I think it was. Anyway, engaged, active student leadership group that do an incredible job. If you've seen some of their testimony with the regions, you'll know what I mean. So we're pretty well covered there. Mike?
Jeff, good point, because when meeting with legislators, they've said the following: it's really nice to hear from university folks, and so we should all let them know why we want a vibrant university, not just for a paycheck, but what it gives to the community and all the things we talked about today. But here are the people they really listen to. They listen to students, and we heard this over and over again from legislators, the most powerful testimonies to why university makes that much of a difference in their life. They listen to alumni, and so our alumni, I saw Kate Ripley here, I think our alumni are headed down the week after next. That's a powerful voice as well. They listen to business leaders because they want to know that why the School of Management should be vibrant in Fairbanks, Alaska. Well, it's because a lot of our businesses take accountants and business managers from our program. So those are the really powerful voices, and our students do a great job because it's not self-serving administrators going down to talk about the value of the institution. It's actually the students that we serve. So that's the most powerful voice that we could possibly have had. I would add just two things, Mike, if I can. One is that Mike keeps talking about the urgency in terms of our messaging, whether it's this group or the community or the state of Alaska. So the $288 million proposed by Representative Wilson is still on the table. She's looking for comments from the subcommittee by tomorrow at 5 p.m. So the influencing of the subcommittee by 5 p.m. tomorrow is very important for a hearing that will begin at 7 p.m. Wednesday night. And so the shaping that subcommittee of the university's budget will be influenced at 5 based on our input from now until then, although a lot has gone on since we first saw this number. And then the committee, the full committee will take a look at it at 7 p.m. And Michelle Renfrew and her colleagues at the system office are coming up with a talking points and things that we can share with the community, so then you can use that in terms of sending messages to that subcommittee and to all of the legislators next week. Perhaps the Senate will get that, and that will be another target for our messaging as well, letting the Senate know what we think about the university.
You have a question over here?
Yes.
I don't know if I'm the only one in the room, but the one word I haven't heard today, which I'm going to bring up, and the only one in the room who thinks this might be a pink elephant in the room that we're all ignoring, is athletics. Am I the only one who's questioning this?
No, that has come up. That too will be reviewed.
Okay.
Lots of reasons that it is part of a typical NCAA Division I program hockey in particular. The community endorsement, the showcase front porch of the university, the results of GPA relative to the students that it attracts. Lots of reasons, but it is also under review.
So, and I love athletics, don't get me wrong. I think they're a really vital part to people growing up, and people, as you said, your development was really inbred in working with athletic teams and you know, getting your core you know, personal goals from that. I get that. But there are people who do other things, such as the arts or creative writing or whatever, who also gain the same type of you know, goals in their life and mission and drive from other things. I'm going to suggest one thing is that there's lots of things on this campus besides athletics that really draw people in to our campus, whether it be, you know, writing seminars or, you know, outreach through you know, the food bank or arts or whatever. And there's lots of other things besides the big hockey team, the Fairbanks Symphony. There's student groups, and which are vital to everybody else, because those groups serve very few people, and yet we sponsor them as being the events that attract everybody to our university. Can I suggest that we actually try to bring up the other groups as you know, the entities that also serve the university? And maybe we could, and I know I'm kind of bringing up a touchy subject here, maybe we can take some of the funding from those top groups and put them into the actual groups that serve more students. And, you know, maybe we don't need to be double NCAA. We weren't before. There's other things that we could do that cost less money. I don't know. That's
point well taken. The Ollie program, by the way, talk about an incredible story. Jeff, and then this will be the last unless there's something hot. Oh, okay. 1, 2.
Where we move, if we move our athletics to Anchorage, the teams will be better, and then have games up here. So, you know, in our budget, have $1 million or what have you to transport them up instead of 10 million. And our teams would be better. We'd still have branding. Anchorage has a $110 million new athletic stadium. Doesn't do hockey, don't ask me why. But they have it, and it would be in line with strategic pathways.
Appreciate any and all thoughts.
We're getting real close to time here, a little bit after.
I have a pretty loud voice. I just had a comment that maybe in the next few weeks we could have another meeting like this, but instead of having a presentation, maybe having more of like a, you know, just a panel where we could ask questions.
Okay.
Just a conversation, because I've gotten a lot of out of listening to what other people have been asking. Of course, you have to make a presentation just to get the conversation started, but maybe next time, maybe all of you just be on a panel, we can ask questions and just, it feels a little bit not both direction on that.
Okay, sure. I actually, I think something sooner than later way this budget's moving to would probably be helpful.
Town hall meeting.
Yeah. Other last minute? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much for
Thank you, Chancellor. I wanted to thank OIT, the Wood Center staff, and especially video conferencing services for helping us webcast today in this non-traditional webcast venue. Thank you.